I'm Dorothy Gable, and this is the Dorothy Gable Books YouTube channel. Today I'm going to have the first in a series on my journey and how my books went from being in my head to publishable. It was a long journey. I always loved story and reading, especially fiction. From the time I learned how to read when I was a little girl, especially in the younger grades, if I couldn't read 2 to 3 books a week, these were novels, I was sad. And I continued to read all the way through high school until the time you marry, get kids, get really busy. And then at that time began to transition into creating my own stories in my head. So if I didn't have a book to read that week, at least I would create my own. And I had multiple stories going at the same time, but I never thought I wrote well enough to be able to do anything about it. Didn't even know that I could write a whole fiction novel. Until by this time we were up in northern Canada, hundreds of miles away from home. In 1995, my grandmother was turning 90, and the only thing that she had left is that she loved to read fiction. So the Lord gave me a crazy idea. Why don't you write her a novel? I thought, what? Okay, I'll give it a try. So I began to dream up a story. Based on the area where we had raised our support in southern New York State, it was set in a very fun time to write about, the Civil War period. And I did write that book, and it was an incredible journey to find out that I could write fiction novels. I got it mostly done in time for her birthday in December. And it was a real joy to hear how much she enjoyed it. And I also shared it with many other of my friends and family. But one thing that always bothered me is that I knew that I had to improve my writing ability. It just wasn't exactly where it needed to be. And between those years, for about several years, while we went back home, I became an accountant. We were living in Wisconsin. And my father died unexpectedly. And my mother came to move in with us because she couldn't live on her own. We didn't understand at the time that she had dementia. She was with us for 6 years, and during that time, as I helped her through her dementia journey, I had many questions. Many were unanswered because I didn't have the time to research them or anything. So after she died and we moved to a different state, the Lord said, hey, you're going to write a book about dementia caregiving. I said, do you really know who you're requesting this of? Okay, yes. I know I would love to find out what happened, and I have a degree in biology so I could research it, but I really wasn't given great writing talent. But the Lord pressed me into a corner, and 3 years of reading and researching and writing and tears and travail, I ended up with Dementia Caregiving from a Biblical Perspective. This book ended up being a grand prize winner for a writing award last year, which was a great encouragement and endorsement because I wrote it not just for my family, not just as our story, but I included other stories so that could be a resource for other caregivers like me who were struggling to help their loved one when they didn't have a ton of time to find the answers they needed. Well, what really helped is that one of the ladies who helped me with it, her mother also had dementia, and she was also a really good editor. She very patiently edited each chapter. I'd get the chapter in, I'd make the changes, and as I began to put in those changes through Word, my brain began to learn how to write better. So my writing improved to the point where I'm thinking, well, maybe I can write my other fiction novels and maybe I could publish them. So before we get into the very next one, which we're going to cover the part about editors and beta readers, how they all help with that. There's just a few questions you have to ask yourself if you want to consider the hard work of making that journey yourself. Now, I had been under the impression that if you were a good writer, you were a good writer, and you'd go into these college classes and you'd be just great, and the teachers would tell you that you could write. Well, there are very, very few people who have that kind of talent. There are people like me who have the ability if they put the work in. Now, that doesn't mean I'm ever going to be a A-list or top bestseller, but that meant that I have enough writing ability that it can be publishable and I could share the stories God has given me with others, and that they could be an encouragement, and it can help them in their Christian life. So, first thing to ask yourself, are you a storyteller? Has God put story in your soul? When you see something or a situation, does a story come to mind? For example, I was reading Ezekiel 38:39. I love prophecy. I was doing another stop prophecy through that section. And as I was reading Ezekiel 38, I got the opening vision of the Barrier novel about a young man who was going through the millennium. And years later, it became a novel that I wrote. If the Lord puts stories in your heart, don't ignore them. Perhaps that eventually will be your calling someday, even if it's not your calling today. The second question you have to ask yourself is the content of your books broad enough and interesting enough that other people other than friends or family are going to be interested in it? And one of the beta readers that I had for the dementia caregiving book was very good about asking me that very question, like, who are you writing this for? Are you writing this for just your family? Or you're writing it for others to help them? And I, by that time, had learned so much that I know other caregivers needed to know this information. I said, hey, I want to write it to help any dementia caregiver. Okay, says, well, then you've got to get rid of a lot of this stuff. This is what you have to focus on. That was great advice. So make sure your content is something that other people are going to want to read and purchase. And then the other big one is your writing style and ability ready for publication? Because once it's published, it's out there. We want to put that on the best face possible. I wrote my novels from the mid-1990s up until when I started publishing them in 2020. That's a long time. But I needed that time to grow in my Christian walk, to mature, but also to improve my writing ability. The fourth one is, are you willing to put in the hours it's going to take to get a work from actually writing a full draft, maybe 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 words, to it ready to be published? Let me tell you, a book that someone can read maybe in 4 hours will probably took that author and their team about 4 months or more. And then when you get into promotional marketing and everything else, you add even more. It takes time. It takes your dedication to one part of the day, if you're also working full time or retiring as I was able to do and work full time at my writing, to stick with it. Stay tuned for the next one in the series where we're going to talk about how editors and beta readers are a very important part of that process. Thanks for watching. Made possible thanks to my editor and producer, Ralph Gable, creator of Electronics for the Inquisitive Experimenters. See you later.